Okay, you can always just share it with me. Veronica for putting this together tonight. I think it's a great guide for all of us who have children learning at home, regardless of their age, really. What I've seen in preparation for tonight applies not only to our elementary school students, but to junior high and high school as well. So I think it's coming at just the right time.
Welcome, everybody. I am Mrs. Zareniga. That was Dr. Whitbeck, and Mrs. Bunnell is also here. We wanted to share with you something that the district has provided us with, which is a learning guide. So we believe it's really important for all of us to partner together to make the remote learning successful. It's a really challenging thing and a really challenging time. And with some tips, we're hoping we can help make it more successful for you in your own homes.
So we understand everyone is coming to this presentation with different levels of angst or joy, as it may be. And we thought we would take just a minute to share with us what you hope to get out of this presentation. Jenna and I have, and Dr. Whitbeck have created a couple of slides for us to go through, as well as to show you a few resources. And then we want to save some time at the end for questions for sure, but just so we can guide us, if anyone wants to put anything in the chat, what you hope to get out of this presentation, or if you would like to unmute yourself to speak.
Spit out water, spit it into the cup.
We may want to mute. Can you mute everyone, Mrs. Zareniga, or no? Or make sure that everybody's on mute?
I can.
Okay. And then if you do want to unmute yourself or put something in the chat, what are you hoping to get out of tonight's presentation?
I'm going to mute everyone, Hillary, and then unmute you. There you go.
Okay.
So yes, if you can pop it in the chat, what it is you hope to get out of tonight's presentation.
And if you're not sure and you're just here, that's cool too. We're happy to have you. We did not want to present to ourselves, so we are thrilled.
Even though we are fascinating. Oh, I should unmute Chris too.
The magic of the mute button. All right, so hopefully people are here to just get an idea of some strategies that may help with remote learning, and some resources that we have in the district. So this is the first resource that we want to share with you, the AB District Remote Learning Guide. This may be a little funky while I figure this out.
Important to mention that this is the guide where we picked up all of these ideas that we're sharing with you. So we went through it, we picked out what we thought would be the most helpful. It's certainly available for you to look at and read from cover to cover, and there's a lot of excellent information in there, and I encourage you to do that at your own pace.
Excellent. So this is just the first page where it goes through all the different categories, and then each page has its own kind of organization of what they'll talk about, which is great. All right, and go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So if you want to find out where it is, the district website has all of this information, and sometimes it's super hard to find it. So if you go to the district website home page, there's a little section in the middle that's circled that says COVID Transition to School website. If you click on that, this screen comes up. And if you scroll down a little, tucked in here, hiding away, is this Family Remote Learning Guide, which is what we were just looking at, that is full of all of this important information. And we will put a link to this into the chat so that you can go back to this if you're interested in finding it. We're going to show you a few other places later in the presentation too.
Has anyone been able to access this from the website? If you know how to raise your hand, you can raise your hand. Yeah, it's a little tucked away, so it may be hard to find, but definitely lots of great information on the web. So the first area we're going to talk about today is creating a learning environment at home, right? When we went home in March last year, we had no idea what we were in for. In September, we had a little bit more of an idea, but still maybe unsure. So when we want to create a learning environment at home, we want to use the space that we have, right? Each family is different. Each learning space is different. Each kid is different in terms of how much support they may need or may not need. So balancing all of that is going to be really important for you to work with your children, which you probably have already done. Sometimes people have to change things up a little bit, but here are some of the guiding principles for designing a learning space. Multiple designated areas. Your child will need to be able to move around a little bit in order to be engaged, finding that quiet space for reading and math, so that they know this is the time where I really need to focus. I'm getting my work done. A technology zone in sight of an adult so that you can be there on hand. Our teachers and assistants are certainly there as well too. You can also monitor what they're on, in case you have someone who likes to find YouTube or something like that rather than where they're supposed to be. Space should be consistent so that habits form in relation to the space. So making sure that you have your supplies handy, you have what you need. Also thinking about snacks and water, right? Really important to stay hydrated so that you can function at your best.
I think it's important too in creating the environment that the kids relate it to school and to school expectations, so that when they go to their space and it's time to learn, it's time to learn. So they associate those two things together, that school can happen at home, and here's my spot for it.
Excellent. And I think that's really hard. It's much easier said than done. And so many of our kids, many of our adults, we're still working on that. And that's okay. So along with that, you need to establish some routines so that they have some voice in their learning environment. And you have a voice as well, too. Finding that specific spot, sitting in a chair, not in a bed is what's recommended, right? The bed can be a little too comfy sometimes. So sitting upright, being dressed, right? Ready for school, on time. Practicing the universal responses. So we've done some trainings on this, and our teachers, I think, are going to do some training on this as well too, making sure that they know that thumbs up, clapping, all those things that the teachers are asking for so that we know that they're there. The mute function, our kids are doing great with that mute and unmute. They're doing it all day long when they're on Zoom. And know the teacher's expectations, right? Each teacher, each grade may have their own expectations. We've gone over that with students, and sometimes they need reminders. That's okay. Make sure you have some idea of what those expectations are, and check in with your child just like you would in a normal, in-person day of school. You also want to know how that async work is going, and lots of communication between parents and teachers. Jenna, Chris, and I are all here to help support you as well. And we do a lot of communicating with parents. This is not easy for anyone. We're all at different stages in the game, and just when we think we have it mastered, sometimes we need to go back to basics and reestablish some of those routines.
Mrs. Benal, you may be talking about this later, but we have a question in the chat around ways to reinforce a routine at home during asynchronous and remote learning days if you're a working parent.
Yes. So very difficult, right? I mean, you're working from home and trying to get your work done. So I'd say as much as you can set up ahead of time, as much as you can talk to your child about what the day will look like. Maybe they have a schedule either from you or from their teacher. Maybe they've created their schedule of what their work is going to do. Sometimes different incentives have helped, get this thing done and then we'll go do this, or we'll have this snack based on, what your meeting schedule is like. Maybe there's some time for some extra outside play if it's nice enough, or something like that.
I would add too that just setting the expectations is really helpful. Like anything else you do, they need time to practice what the expectations are. And if they're struggling to get on, like to their classroom or to the seesaw, make sure that every possible roadblock is removed so that they can be successful independently. But it takes practice and it takes a lot of work.
The other thing we've talked about with a bunch of parents too is that although it's an async day in your home, you're getting credit for a school day. So let's put in a school day. Let's not put in one assignment or one, quick Google Meet, a quick hello. This is a school day. So if we're getting credit for this, let's make this like a school day, and then try to keep it as consistent as possible, which I know is really hard because the schedule does not always line up every week, right? Each day can be a little bit different.
I think we're also going to be having some changes that parents can look for at Douglas School beginning next week. That may add a little bit more schedule to students' asynchronous days. Just a teaser for you to keep paying attention to my evening updates.
I'll be reading them too.
So now we were hoping to hear from you. Did you say hold on?
I'll unmute everybody.
Oh, okay. So please share how it's going in your family. Tell us something that's been helpful, that's worked well for you, so we can learn from you. And then tell us something that you're still working on, something that's still a little bit of a struggle at home. And no judgment at all.
You can certainly unmute yourself, or you can drop it in the chat.
I guess I'll start with the quiet. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I guess something that has been helpful, not every single time, but my kids do love their screens. So, having a set time, like, the Xbox not even able to turn on until a certain amount of time. So it takes us out of the equation. So they already know that it can't even turn on. And then, just, making sure that their work is done, before any game time. Something that is a little challenging is I'm super not like tech savvy, so I'll have trouble with the computer. They'll be like, "Oh, I'm done," and I'm like, "Are you though?" And then I'll find out like it wasn't completed all the way. Or, and sometimes I'll just wonder like how much they're like the quality of the work and what they're getting in, yeah, so that can be hard because I'm not the best at going on Google Classroom and I'm like, that's the wrong tab. And he's like, it's right. Like, trying to figure out it and,
Yeah, and I certainly get feedback that my own kids don't want me in their Google Classroom, and I'm like, that's too bad. That's like your schoolwork, and I'm allowed to look at it, and that just takes the arguing out. Definitely is pushback.
Yeah, I think taking the time to learn Seesaw or Google Classroom is really worth it. You can see all the assignments that are due. You can look and see what your child has handed in, and really get a sense of whether it lives up to your expectations or not.
And we're going to talk about that at the end. We're going to show you how to learn more about those platforms and where you can look for videos and tutorials on how to use those. Because we realize that for a lot of parents, the platforms are new. Is there something in the chat? Definitely bribing with screen time, getting involved in creating his workspace. He was disappointed that he couldn't access YouTube from the school tablet.
No, they were disappointed that
you could
access it. We can only lock them down so much and still have children be able to use the tools that we need them to. And a lot of the videos are on YouTube that the teachers assign.
I misread that. They do be able to see it for some of their asynchronous lessons.
We've just bought another router and I sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I don't. Like my husband just bought another router, so we can finally ban YouTube, and like for the times that we need to, because they'll like do their work, and then they'll go on YouTube, and it's just like you come up and you're like, I thought that you were doing your work, and they're like, then they're doing the tabs, like moving over, and then they're acting all cool, and you're like, I just saw that. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I find the same thing with Mrs. Lareniga when I walk into her office.
I'm on Amazon.
It's
I would
really
say
hard.
if it's at all possible, and I know we've said this and I'll keep restating it, every house is different and every family, what you can do is different, but could you put a station a little bit closer so they know you have one eyeball on what they're doing? I, that's one suggestion as a way to do that. I love that you're out teching them.
Someone else is saying in the chat, I found out he had YouTube when I walked in. He was hiding under his bed with his tablet. Yeah. I mean, they're creative. I mean, we definitely have raised some creative and impressive children. I have 3 at home as well, too. So they're always trying to push the envelope for sure.
Yeah, stay out of the bed. That's a big takeaway. Create a workspace other than the bed.
One parent wrote using the to-do tab to check to see if any work is missing for each child on asynchronous days has been very helpful. That's in Google. We have found too that kids do the work and they forget to hit turn in. So sometimes it's really simple for a parent to catch that.
Kendra, how do you use the Google Nest Hub for time management? Just like by setting timers?
Yeah, timers. It's kind of like if someone has Alexa, same idea, where Graham will go over and say, hey, Google, set a timer for 15 minutes. And then he knows that's his reading time and it keeps him on track. Or set a timer for 9:30 when, he has his Zoom class or whatever. You can like preset it and then everybody's on the same page. So that's been a huge plus for time management in the house.
Probably
I love that. That's great.
Control,
Yeah.
He's telling the Nest what's going on. That's
right. And especially as you're busy with your work meetings and everything that you're doing, to leave in the middle to go get a kid off is always a little challenging to do. So helping, giving them some of that ownership. That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Other thoughts about things that are working or things that you're still working on?
Hi, I was just wondering, well, one of the things that we're still working on is I have a first grader who is learning to read and learning to write. And I think I'm having a hard time with what is expected of me to help them do things as opposed to what she's actually supposed to be doing on her own.
Yes, I think that's not just a first grade situation. I can appreciate that it's probably very challenging with the younger ones, but I think that runs the gamut. And I would have a conversation with the teacher and ask what their expectation is and see how close you are to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think too, I mean, depending on your child, how either distracted or stressed out they get over an assignment, you might help a little more or less depending on that, depending on their mood in that given day, depending on what the specific assignment is. We want them to be as independent as possible, but we understand everybody's on a different path. Our teachers are working with students about, signing in and doing things online so that they have they are more comfortable with that. And so definitely reach out to the specific teacher just to make sure you're on the right track.
And I know that in Seesaw, a lot of the teachers do a small video instruction, or they read the instructions audio to the children, and what's sent home in first and second grade should be really at the just right reading levels if there's other reading materials that are sent home. So if that's not working, that's really important feedback for the teacher.
All right, should we one more or move on?
Nothing in the chat and I'm not hearing anybody, but feel free to.
Here's something just on the chat. Couple chat messages. For Seesaw, unsure of what the worksheets are called. and to have a central checklist to know what's been completed or not. Yeah, so sometimes there's a form that's given right in Seesaw, and the children will work right in Seesaw, and sometimes they're working on something that has come home with them. Yeah, it's kind of an organizational piece that is hard to organize, and it does take our time as parents. Um, and we can the idea of a centralized checklist to know what hasn't been completed in the younger grades is not a bad idea. I'll bring that back to the teachers and see if there's something that we don't know about in Seesaw, because you can look in Seesaw, but you've got to go through day by day by day by day by day by day. So it is quite arduous.
I think that's a
Can
great.
I say, so Miss Hunt, I don't know who your child has, but my daughter has Miss Hunt and she's in first grade, and she sends home this, I don't know if you guys can see it. Oh, probably not.
No, we can't see that.
Yeah, yeah.
Reflect.
Maybe I should go run downstairs, or maybe not. It's just a piece of paper and it says the days of the week on it. So this
Yeah.
one says just Tuesday and Friday, and it says their schedule, and then it says activity materials hand in, and then so there's 4 activities that she needs to do, and it says where it is, either in Seesaw or it says piece of paper, and then it'll say like what the title of the piece of paper is. So I don't know if the other teacher in whatever grade, but this is something that's really helpful because this goes with her folder. So she goes to school Monday, and then she brings home in her folder this piece of paper, and it tells me every single day of what is due, even on it says it on, it'll say Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, and how all the papers that she needs to do on those async days, and the ones that are due, the papers, and then, or it'll say, in Seesaw. So that's helpful because that's like her checklist that she's giving me to.
I can imagine it would be very frustrating for a child to sit down and want to start their work and not know where to find things. So the more we can streamline that for the kids, the better, I think. So I like that idea, and I think Chris will definitely take that back.
Awesome. All right, let's keep going.
There's a question about accessing kids' school email accounts and knowing what needs to be done, because a parent can see it in the student's emails. I'm not sure of exactly the situation. For the most part, I'm assuming that most of the assignments come through Google Classroom, but perhaps I'm wrong on that. Maybe Susan, you can clarify for us what you mean.
Sure. Sorry. So oftentimes I've had people ask me if they should access their kids' emails just to see, because some of the email comes to like my daughter's email, even when it's posted to Google Classroom. So it's easier for her to see the assignments in her email. And, especially with my 3rd grader, she never had any sort of access to email or Google Classroom or anything last year, and missed that, end of 2nd grade. And so she didn't even know how to use email when she entered 3rd grade, and everything was remote. So it's easier for her to actually check off her assignments through her email. But for parents not knowing what is coming, it was easier to see it on the email. So I just don't know if parents should access their email so that they can then be able to filter it or not. Some teachers said it was okay, and some teachers would prefer not to. So I just wanted to be, it's just another idea for parents.
Yeah, so I would say that it's the school's expectation that a parent has every right to look at a student's email or their Google Classroom account, and that is an excellent way of keeping on top of that. We always had the rule at our house that, and still do, that as long as I was paying for your phone, I had access to it as a parent. um, so I would say the same thing of a school email account, that as the taxpayer who's sending their child to school, you should feel free to look at that.
Just don't be shocked if you find things like roadblocks and other invitations to play IO games during class time.
Along those same lines, it would be helpful to get email for my son's in first grade, so it's on his device, because sometimes the links will come through for like maybe a change in the time or the Zoom class, and then I've had to load it on my device because it's in my email as opposed to his email.
I get you.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Does the teacher know that?
I don't know that I've raised that with her. It's happened a couple times, but it just is sporadic. But I think it would be good for him to kind of get used to email, right? I mean, who knows what next year is going to look like, and just from a logistics standpoint too.
District doesn't open that up to children until third grade. So that would be a broader conversation, but I
Okay.
it's important to tell the teacher that that's an extra step in terms of getting
Yeah.
Zoom, and if there's a way to send that through Seesaw where he could access
Yeah.
Seesaw directly,
Mm-hmm.
that might be easier, because that would be hard. You have to shuffle at the last minute.
Yeah. Yep.
It's very stressful.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can do that.
The other thing too is we are doing our best to make sure that all of the in-person and asynchronous learning times are covered. And so we sometimes are scrambling to make sure, given, various quarantines or sick or things, or people are out. So today, Jenna and I had the honor of hopping into a Zoom today to work with kids on an asynchronous day. It was very, very cool. So I think that link went out through Seesaw, though. I think the teacher was able to put it out through there, but definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah, that was a great thing to do, because you also see what it's like to teach remotely and how challenging it is for everybody. So should I go on?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next section was on habits to maintain wellness for your child. And I think a lot that's in here holds true, not only for remote times, but just in general in terms of raising kids. And I am no expert, but the experts, the real ones, say that sleep is very important, and that you need to have a family plan to develop good sleep habits, that your child should have an established bedtime and an established bedtime routine. And the hours that the American Pediatrics Association recommends for sleep are right there on the slide. And what I found shocking as the parent of a 12-year-old is 9 to 12 hours of sleep a night. And someone suggested, have your child go to bed a half an hour earlier than normal and watch how long they sleep, and almost guarantee you they will not wake up a half an hour earlier. They will absorb that sleep, and it will help their brain and their growth. So I think as a culture, we grossly underestimate and grossly undersleep our children. So just to remember that that's really important. And I know when we have children in school that are having a rough day, the first thing we'll ask is, did you get any sleep? And are you hungry? Because hunger and keeping them well fed and well hydrated is also very, very important. Electronics routines. Again, I feel a bit like preaching to the choir because I have kids and I know how hard this is, but you want to try to set limits on screen use, even in the pandemic. You definitely want 30 minutes before bedtime, those phones and Chromebooks out of the room, not only so that it avoids the temptation, but also because the blue lights in their eyes before bedtime will really impact their ability to fall asleep. And you want to make sure that the devices are out of the room at night, even if you have to go buy an alarm clock. And then the thing we were talking about before was checking in with your child's device use. Go into their Google Classroom, go into their Gmail, check their phones, check their texts. I know that in this time, the kids are not as social with each other in person. So a lot more is taking place on their devices and on their chat rooms and things like that, Discord and all those things. I just would advise to just check in with those things from time to time.
The other thing I want to say too is to be kind to yourself. Again, I have an 11, an 8, and a 5-year-old. The amount of electronics that my children are on is not something I would brag about for sure. But it's also, we're kind of in like the pandemic electronic routine. So again, you have to figure out what works for your family, and screens are where they are right now. So, finding ways to limit them, as we talked about before, no Xbox, no YouTube until 3 o'clock, until the school day is done. Those kinds of things can be really helpful, but also be gentle with yourself too, because you're working really hard to manage everything at home and your child at home.
Well said. So we talked about this before. Learn Seesaw or Google Classroom. Really important to know how to log in, know how to protect their password, and learn how to turn in an assignment, because we're finding that's one of the biggest challenges that we have got. And in the district website, again, on the home page, there's a line that says hybrid and remote learning digital resources. It's boxed in there. If you click on that, it takes you to another site that explains almost every single remote learning tool that the district has and how you might use it. And there are even videos on use for you to watch to see how to access and use the different things that the district offers. I'm amazed at how much digital technology we have.
It's also the kind of thing too, I learn best in an environment where the teacher's teaching in front of me and I can stop and ask questions and things like that. It's much harder to do on your own. But if you are able to take a few minutes on your own, maybe put some headphones in or something like that, and be able to walk yourself through step by step, it gives you a lot of knowledge, which is good. All right. So we thought we would pause and see if we have any other questions or lingering ideas that are coming up. It's about 7:35. So we have another few minutes or so if people have other questions or other lingering thoughts.
You can pop them in the chat or unmute yourself and share.
So I guess I just want to ask your advice on like routine in terms of like, so I'm just trying to figure out if this is like, because I always thought like, oh, Jonah's day finishes, my 3rd grader finishes so early. But after thinking about it, when he's done all his work and done like some extra reading time that the teacher established, and then with recess and lunch, I'm like, I don't know if it's even that much. Like, I think it's because I used to think, oh, because he'll finish around like 10:30, he'll be done. And I'm like, please just read for 30 minutes. And some days I get him to, and some days I don't. I just pick the battles and what mood I'm in and what he's in and whatever, and when I'm getting done with the other two. And so, and I just feel like that's like so early. And I talked to the teacher about it, and she says, that's kind of typical, and, give them the extra reading time. And she does give other ideas of things for them to do. Cause I've seen before how it'll say early finishers and then something for them to do. But I mean, that's typical, right? Like, cause say he finishes at 10:30, like, cause I'm trying to think of an actual school day. Cause I just feel like, and I know that none of this is anyone's fault. Like, it's just what life is right now. But I just feel like there's just so much time that they're missing learning, because that's just so 9 to 10:30, and then a little bit of reading, maybe 11, maybe like 10:45, and then it's just nothing the rest of the day. And so I just feel like they're just missing so much. And I guess a part of this is just venting, but and then it just made me think like, I guess that just shows how much school really is for the socialization of them being with friends and everything with that. So
yeah, there's a lot to what you've said. So in 3rd grade, we're really looking at a sustained half an hour to maybe 45 minutes of work in language arts and in math, plus probably one other area of work. So you're looking at realistically 90 minutes to 2 hours of work. So if you do start at 9 o'clock, being done by 11, if you're working straight through and getting it done is realistic. There's usually a check-in for some time with one of the assistants. So that is also an important time. And we are going to be adding some check-in times with the teachers on those days as well. So that's going to be coming up, and the staff and I will be discussing what that looks like at the different grades, but trying to bring the kids together from both the classroom and the asynchronous kids on a daily basis. So it might be in morning meeting, it might be in a read aloud, it might be in an afternoon check-in. That's actually an interesting question for me from the parents who are here, and I know that you're a very small subgroup of parents at Douglas, but I wonder how an end of the day check-in from school would interrupt your routines.
I'm wondering how long the check-in would be. And I know you may not even know, but
Okay.
my kid's excuse right now is, oh, we don't need it. And I'm like, just do it. Because I'm like, Hillary says it's good. I'm like, just do the check-in, just do it. And then my sixth grade is like, it's just questions. I'm all set.
So these
I'm
will
like-
be so these will be mandatory, and they will be the attendance part of the day.
Oh, so that's
So
good.
they could range anywhere from some will be 20 minutes, some will be 10 minutes. It might be about half an hour to 45 minutes within the day in total. But we haven't had any chance to really plan what this might look like exactly. But one of the thoughts that was put out by the group of principals was to have an end of the day check-in with kids for like 10 or 15 minutes. So that would be, let's say, at 3 o'clock. But we have no idea what that will do to families.
Can I chime in on that?
Yes, please.
So I love the idea of one more check-in. It's interesting to hear the perspectives of each of the parents, just because we are, I think, all in a slightly different boat. My child's also in third grade, and the amount of effort it takes to get him to do his work actually takes quite a long time. And so putting more, I'm kind of like, but I love the idea of another check-in. But for families that have other children that maybe they need to be picking up, just making it early enough in the day where that's not an issue. For us, 3 o'clock would be like the very latest time, and we would have to miss the end of it.
Yeah,
just making sure it's a little
done
early.
by 3 o'clock, right?
I need to be done by like 3:10. So it would just thinking about that aspect of it I think would be helpful.
Yeah, that's good feedback. Thank you.
I kind of want to chime in about that end of the day check-in as well. I have a fifth grader and a third grader, and usually my kids are up early, but they generally start their work sometimes even at 8 o'clock because they're up. So, and my third grader is definitely typically done by 11 or so. So I think it might be kind of hard to like really get meaningful engagement at the end of the day, especially, if your child is kind of finished their work by lunchtime. I'm not sure, like my third grader has a 1 o'clock check-in right now. And even that, I sometimes find that the engagement level, when you've completed your work, it's harder to engage when everything is finished. So just some food for thought on that.
Yeah, yeah, good. Thank you.
If I can comment, since this whole pandemic, our goal when we finished schoolwork is we were, every day about 2, whenever we, had lunch, and then we get outside and we would hit the trails, we'd go for hikes, anything like that would be our outside time. So I agree, end of the day. would not work for our three and our routine that we've been on, it'd be tough.
So, so far I'm hearing something before 2, or definitely not after 3, but the end of your at-home day is very different than our end of the in-school day time-wise.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
And even on the asynchronous days, since September, for example, I'm sure I'm not alone in this, just had made plans to supplement with a tutor in some cases. And so
Yeah.
that's pre-scheduled, and, it's hard to get slots and timing. And I worry about mandatory meetings at this stage of the game, and how, we would just manage everything that, we'd planned on the schedule presented back in August, September. But, we'll see what comes.
Right. Yeah, we're feeling the same way. The state threw an extra 6 hours at us, or 3 hours per cohort, that we're trying to figure out how to provide. So,
Yeah.
A bit like changing the field in the middle of the game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Do it.
So, all right. Other questions or things for Mrs. Lareniga and Mrs. Benal?
We thank you so much for joining us. We know how hard it is to then sit on a Zoom after you've been on Zoom all day. We are still here. Like, if you need anything, obviously, reach out to us, reach out to your child's teacher. We definitely all know firsthand how hard this is. So good for you for the job you've been doing so far, and let us know what you need.
Definitely, I would echo that. And, it's very simple to say, set up a workspace, have a schedule, have a routine. Sometimes you need to keep adjusting that routine and you don't quite have it down yet. So, definitely reach out to us, reach out to your child's classroom teacher. We are here to support each other for sure. Thanks so much for coming, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.